Chad, week 4 is here for college football. It's been a really, really fun start to the season. A lot of big news happening all over, a lot of great games. But we're just going to jump right into the first one on the slate. A massive Big Ten matchup here. USC headed to the Big House to take on Michigan at +5.5. Now, Michigan's the reigning national champions, and they are either the first or second most disappointing team so far this season. They lost J.J. McCarthy, they lost Blake Corum, they lost Jim Harbaugh. That's all well and good. But isn't this supposed to be one of the most powerhouse programs in the country? Shouldn't they be able to have Sharon Moore step in and find a serviceable quarterback in the transfer portal? I mean, Ohio State got a transfer quarterback. Miami got a transfer quarterback. Like, all these big schools are going out and spending big money on a transfer. And what did Michigan do? They said, no, we're fine with Alex Orji and Davis Warren. Well, Davis Warren went out and was probably the worst quarterback in the country, period. He looked awful. He looks like a walk-on for a reason. And he has now been benched this week going for Alex Orji from Michigan. But even with that, I'm still riding with USC at -5.5 here. I think USC's offense has been awesome so far this year. I like how Miller Moss looks. The defense against LSU, definitely a big step up from last year. I mean, it would be impossible for USC's defense to get worse than last year. But Michigan just doesn't have the offense to put up points, period. I mean, Alex Orji, I know that people love him in college football 25. He's fast, he's strong, but that doesn't apply in real life. The fact of the matter is, he and Davis Warren battled the entire offseason, the entire training camp. The coaches watch them every single day. And what do they decide? Davis Warren is better. Like, again, I'm not someone to be like, oh, well, the coaches decide that they're guaranteed right, because we've seen plenty of times the backups come in and be better than the starters. But at the same time, like, they had an entire offseason with Orji projected to be the starter. They probably wanted to give him the job, and he must have been bad enough that, like, we can't play him. So that's kind of mostly what I'm going off of here. I don't think he's going to come in and, like, bring any life to the Michigan offense. Sure, he might bring on the quarterback run, but are they going to call 25 carries for him? I don't think so. I don't care that it's on the road. I'm riding with USC here. Michigan is just in the complete toilet right now.
Yeah, it's my favorite play of your picks this week. Looking through, USC's got 2 weeks to prepare. They're coming off a bye, and they're going to the Big House to play a fractured Michigan Wolverine squad. The quarterback play, like you said, has been terrible. They only put up 28 points against Arkansas State last week. Texas came in the Big House, thumped them. Arkansas State, not generally a good program. Trust me, I know. It's my home state. So they just haven't looked good. They look like they're not a full squad. Meanwhile, USC seems to have a complete, they have the offense rolling under Miller Moss. And credit to you at the beginning of the season. I didn't have much faith in him. But when you looked at what he did in the Holiday Bowl last year in December, and then he comes out week 1, beats LSU, and has looked great so far. Lincoln Riley, I still believe in Lincoln Riley's ability to offensively scheme, especially, like we said, against this fractured Michigan team. So it is a little bit of an odd look, -6 at Michigan, but they just don't have any faith in this Michigan team, man.
Well, speaking of the quarterback that I mentioned before there, Cam Ward, one of the biggest transfers in all of the country. He is now the current favorite for the Heisman Trophy, according to all the odds makers. And he has done a great job with the University of Miami program. They are now headed to South Florida, laying 16.5. What do you think about a potential road spot here for Ward and the Hurricanes?
Just short and sweet. I'm going to take the points at home. Florida scored 17 on Miami week 1, and this is probably the worst Florida team that I've seen in years. And I don't think there's really any arguing that. Listen to an argument there, but the points at home looks good to me. Miami's getting a lot of credit for wins over Ball State, Florida A&M and Florida, and I just don't think those have been great tests. Yeah. Yes, Cam Ward is the Heisman leader at this point in time, but South Florida's been putting up points on the board, and I just simply think that 16.5 is too much.
I like South Florida's quarterback a lot. I think he's hyper athletic. He had a great year last year. He had a great game last game. He puts up numbers. And I think if Miami's defense is not prepared for it, then we could see a shootout type game here. I mean, we see an over-under of 65. So we're certainly implying that points are going to be scored. So the question is really like, well, if Miami's going to get 40, can USF get to 24? I personally think they can. So I'm inclined to agree with you. Take the points here. This is the biggest game of the year for South Florida. Well, I guess they did play Alabama too, but that was on the road. So this is at home. So the fans are going to be super hyped up for this game. South Florida, if they're not going to get hyped up for this game, then, they're not going to get hyped up for any game. So I agree. I think it's a lot of points here for a team with a very underrated offense. So I will ride with you on South Florida. Although speaking of, quarterbacks who have been horrible to start the year in Michigan, let's talk about Florida State. I said Davis Warren is either the first or second most disappointing quarterback this year, and that's because DJ Uyunglele has to be in that conversation. I mean, Davis Warren was a walk-on who sat on the bench for 4 years and never expected to be a starter. DJU was a 5-star prospect ranked ahead of CJ Stroud. He's on $1 million NIL contract with Florida State. Like, he is not supposed to be compared to Davis Warren. But that's the level of play DJ has had. They're not going away from him because they've spent so much money on him, and the team just looks horrible with him. I don't understand why they were favored last week against Memphis. I was on Memphis plus 6.5. They won outright, and now they're going against a Cal team that has also looked very, very solid so far to start this year. Have you seen all the memes on Twitter from the Cal football Twitter? Very, very funny. I highly recommend checking those out. But with a guy like Mendoza at quarterback, Ott at running back, I just don't understand how Florida State is favored against anybody at this point in time. This is a conference matchup. Cal has been okay. You're going to give me plus points to fade DJ? I'm all in. Let's do it.
Yeah, so I'm going to fade myself here, which means I'm going to fade you. And I don't have a great explanation for it. The biggest hot seat in college football right now is Billy Napier. And the second biggest hot seat is Mike Norvell. He took his team. He had a playoff caliber team last year till Jordan Travis got hurt. They looked to be, one of the strongest teams throughout the entire season last year, and then they have just absolutely fallen off. I mean, Florida State's 0-3, Cal's 3-0, and you mentioned the memes. My favorite's the Jurassic Park meme with the bear face as the Velociraptor, and then Florida State DJ's like cowering under the table. Hilarious, great stuff. But I think that this is just a must-win game. I think it's a must-win game for Mike Norvell. It's a must-win game for DJ. It's a must-win game at home for this very impatient Florida State fan base. So for that reason only, I'm going to say Florida State's going to win, and I think 3 points isn't too much to ask.
I do agree it's a must-win game. I just don't believe in DJ's ability to get wins. All right, well, sticking with a team in the ACC, let's move on to Boston College. They're hosting Michigan State this week. BC minus 6.5 right now. They've looked very impressive so far this season. Where are you riding here in this Big Ten ACC matchup?
Well, I picked wrong last week. I thought Mizzou would handle business against Boston College, but the Bill O'Brien squad, they're performing. No, they're ranked now, and I think you're right. Bill O'Brien's not going to last long. His tenure at Boston College just isn't going to be very long. There's going to be some big schools with some big holes in the head coaching positions next year, and I think he's probably either next year or the year after he's going to be moving on to bigger and better things. Missouri narrowly escaped Boston College last week. Castellanos threw for 249 yards, 3 touchdowns, and had a couple of different opportunities to go ahead and go ahead in that game and potentially win it. And that was a big game. Missouri is I think still a powerhouse this year with their offense and their defense, and Boston College kept up with them, the whole game. So looking at that, thinking about the track record so far this year of Michigan State, I just haven't really been that impressed. They beat up on Prairie View. They narrowly escaped FAU in nationally televised, matchup in week 1, and they narrowly escaped Maryland. And while Maryland's better than I thought they would be this year without Tagovailoa, I still think that they haven't impressed me, and Boston College has impressed me. And giving up 7 points at home may kind of steer some people away and say Michigan State, it's a bigger program, it's a more funded team, they have more 4 and 5 star recruits, and I think that the sentiment there is going to be along with Michigan State. So I'm going to go with Boston College minus 7.
Yeah, this is a tricky spot. I definitely agree that Bill O'Brien is not going to last long at BC. I would be shocked if he's there next year, frankly. In fact, I think we might be talking about this exact matchup of Bill O'Brien versus Michigan State next year when he's at the University of Michigan. But in this matchup, I actually kind of like Michigan State. I agree that the matchup week 1 against FAU was not a good look, and it was on national TV, so I think that's where a lot of people are going to view that Michigan State team. But it seems like they've gotten better every single week. They have a new head coach, Jonathan Smith, who I'm very high on, and their new quarterback, Aiden Childs. Remember, that game against FAU was basically his first ever start. So he's been getting better and better as the weeks go on. So is this Michigan State team. As you said, they have 4 and 5 stars littered across the roster, especially on defense. So I don't know. I actually think that more people are going to be on Boston College here because, as you said, they covered against Missouri. They've won outright against FSU. I believe they're 3-0 on the spread this season. So very solid team with a very solid coach. And you're getting, you can win at a 7-point win at the 6.5 line. So I see why people would be on Boston College, but my lean is actually Michigan State here, just because I think that they're a team on the rise with a lot of Big Ten talent around them. Finally, we're going to talk about Utah at Oklahoma State, a rare ranked matchup this week. And if you want to bet on this game or any of the other games we talk about in this video, go to brothrow.com/YouTube now to sign up to take any of our action, fade any of our action, NFL, NCAA, MLB, NBA, NHL, MMA, every sport available. Sign up today. But we're going to chat. Let's talk about Utah and OK State. You know, what's funny about this game is, I'm sure you saw on Twitter, the starting quarterbacks in this game are older than the starting quarterbacks in the Bears-Colts games, in the Caleb Williams, Anthony Richardson. Cam Rising and Alan Bowman, both, I believe, are 7th-year seniors. Crazy, 7 years in college. Should lead to a lot of points, obviously, with guys who have good command of the offense. So I don't mind the over here. But I'm going to ride with Utah because I like their defense a lot better. I mean, Utah is one of the strongest defenses in the Big 12, in my opinion. And, you know, they were able to get the job done last week with Isaac Wilson at quarterback, Zach Wilson's younger brother, stepping in for Cam Rising. So with getting wins without their star players, now you get Cam Rising back in the game. I don't love how OK State's looked this year. They've had to rely mostly on Bowman and not Ollie Gordon, which is not what Mike Gundy wants to do. Gordon is probably the best returning running back in college football. At least he was in terms of yards last year. So if he's not able to get success on the ground, I find it very unlikely to think that Oklahoma State is able to keep up if it does turn into a passing shootout against this Utah defense. I know it's on the road, and OK State fans should be super hyped for this one, but I am riding with Utah and Cam Rising. I love him. I'm a believer in him.
Yeah, the matchup of 2-3-0 teams, 2 ranked opponents. This is going to be a fun game to watch. I've got this one set to watch probably the whole game, maybe just because I'm still pissed about Oklahoma State. But, you know, Oklahoma State defense gave up 650 yards against the Razorbacks, and that's insane. You know, there were about 6 different plays in that game that could have and would have probably, you know, changed the outcome of that game. And then you look at what the Razorbacks did this past week against UAB, and they just did not look good. So I thought that Oklahoma State made them look, you know, even better, even though they got the L there. Like you mentioned, you know, Cam Rising's back, or hopefully back. So if Cam Rising's back, I'm definitely playing Utah. But that seems to be what Utah's putting out, is that he's going to be back starting this week. I expect Utah to be more disciplined with the ball than the Razorbacks. So this for me is an easy pick. You mentioned, you know, both quarterbacks are in their 7th year of college. You know, shout out to a couple of my fraternity brothers. You know who you are. Hey-o. But like I said, this is probably my second favorite pick. This is one that I had circled as well. You beat me to it. So let's take the Utes.
Well, we were aligned on Indiana last week. That was the freest line of the week. So hopefully Utah is just as free. Final game for this video, your last pick, Tulane headed into Louisiana Lafayette, little Sun Belt action there for ULL. Noon game, 2 lesser known teams. What's your insight here on this one?
I like Tulane. I like Darian Mensah and the Green Wave. You know, they've averaged almost 23 points this season, more than what the Cajuns have allowed. But the Cajuns haven't really played anyone in Grambling and Kennesaw State. Tulane put up 27 against Kansas State and covered. They put up 19 against number 15 Oklahoma and in Norman. And they just looked better than I thought they would. You know, I mentioned before the season, or I guess it was week 2, where most of their defense was portal transfers, and I just thought they would have some meshing problems, but they don't seem to have that problem. You know, you've got John Summerall in his first year at Tulane, which was a huge question at the beginning of the year. But he made the jump from Troy last year, where he went 23-4 in his 2 years at Troy. And Tulane is 1-2, but he has at least competed with both of his ranked opponents so far. And I think this is going to be, I actually think this is going to be a blowout. I could be completely wrong. How many times has Louisiana Lafayette disappointed me by fading them? But I think that Tulane's going to get it done this week.
Yeah, I love this pick. I mean, Tulane, as you said, they're 1-2, but their 2 losses are to Kansas State and Oklahoma. You know, iron sharpens iron. So when you go and play those teams and you do okay, again, Tulane didn't get blown out by either one. Hell, they were in that Kansas State one to the very end. They had a shot to win that one outright. So again, with their quality of competition they've gone so far this year, I don't really care that this one's on the road. I agree with you. I think Tulane is just going to absolutely roll them in this game. Their offense has been far too good this year to go against now much weaker competition in Louisiana Lafayette. But that is going to do it for this edition of the Bro Show, College Football Week 4. Again, if you want to ride any of the picks we talked about in this video, go to brothrow.com/YouTube now to sign up. Chad, anything else you want to leave the viewers with before we head out for this one?
Yeah, just a little head nod to the record so far. You know, one man's trash is another man's treasure. But I think that this is the week that you start taking my picks. I'm pretty confident. Let's get 3-0 and let's get back on track.
Let's do it, and we'll catch you guys all in the next one. Peace.